Morning, everyone. Committee meeting today is March 18th. We'll start off with our Parks and Recreation Transportation Committee.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Transportation Committee to order. Let the record reflect that one member is absent. Can the clerk read the first item, please?
Minutes of the March 4th, 2026 Parks and Recreation Transportation Committee meeting.
Wonderful, thank you. Any?
You guys need a motion.
Second.
Wonderful. Any testimony? Any discussion? Seeing none.
All those in favor?
All those in favor.
Aye.
Aye. Well, not me. Sorry.
Thank you. We'll call this meeting adjourned.
I'd like to call the Planning Committee to order. Let the record all members are present except Council Member Kaneshiro. Can I get the first and only item, please?
Bill number 2984, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 8, Article 27, Hōʻike County Code 1987 as amended, relating to shoreline setback and coastal protection, ZA 2026-1, Planning Commission recommendation.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Council members, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to let the introducers have a few words before we get started, and then we'll do some discussion and open for public testimony. Introducers.
Mr. Bulasan, I'm not a member of the committee, but I just had a couple of recommendations. I did talk to the planning director. I understand there may be some possible amendments being introduced. The planning director, as well as the attorney or deputy planning director, is not going to be here next week. They're not available. So my suggestion would be that if, in fact, any amendments are passed that changes the ordinance, that we would ultimately defer so that the final reading of the bill, should it be amended, would be when planning is available. Because I don't want to bring it back to the full council without planning or representative, and we have more questions or more amendments. So that would be my first suggestion. And then the second suggestion is, we've been working on this bill for quite a while now, and Karen Diamond has been an integral part of what we're going through today. Countless hours. So I would just ask that as the committee chair that you would consider her a resource person in the event we have questions, and that she's not limited to the time limits. I have asked Mr. Hall, the planning director, and he is totally fine with that. So that would be my two suggestions.
Yes, I'll confirm both. Any other comments from introducers?
No.
All right, discussion
I
first.
would
Councilmember Cotton?
if possible, I would like to talk to planning. Can they come
Sure.
up, or we want to wait?
Sure. I'll suspend the rules. Planning Director?
Thank you, Chair, members of Council. Kaina Hall, on behalf of the Planning Department, I'm joined with Alicia Summers, our staff planner, that has been the lead on reviewing the draft policy.
Thank you for being here. We had a number of people, a few wrote in testimony where they were concerned, and then a lot more than that simply called me. And so in general, I'm really happy about this bill. I've been supportive of the bill, but I just want to ask a few questions to see if we need to make a tweak here or there. If we don't, we don't. Because a lot of the concern especially came yesterday. So I want to just kind of cover these things. So one of the pieces is, people say, what if my house were to burn down, or even if it wasn't to burn? Let's just talk about fire for a moment. And I saw that you sent me some responses today, but this is for these people are people who live in their houses, and they maybe are less than the 40-foot set. I mean, they're at 40 foot, not 60 feet. And one of these areas is like Kalapaki, right up on that rocky hillside. So if a house were to catch fire there, what's the impact for them, the way this bill is written? Because they are at the 40-foot setback, they're not at 60 foot, they're up on the rocky shoreline, I mean, they're up high. What would be their outcome of a fire on their house?
Each property is case specific depending on where a structure is located in relation to the setback. If a house were to be razed to the ground from wildfire or other forces or voluntarily by the landowner, if the structure is outside the setback, then they can reconstruct that structure. They can also propose a different structure. If a structure is within the setback, then it needs to be relocated outside of the setback when it's rebuilt. If there is not space on the property for a structure to be relocated entirely outside the setback, they would have to apply for a variance permit process under the existing ordinance.
Can you show me in the existing ordinance where that is? Because I was trying to look at that, like how that would happen. Is that right here? Because I kept reading and I couldn't find that in there. Is it just not included here?
No, I mean, the ordinance
they get
works
that
in
variance?
concert. So you have the setback standards of where the setback is, and then you have the, essentially those type of structures that are allowed in the setback, which are essentially minor structures and then nothing else. And then there's the variance section, which is roughly 15 pages. So, I mean, the whole ordinance works in concert with itself.
And just to clarify, Alicia Summers, for the record, planner at the County of Kauai Planning Department, and the specific section is in section 8-27.10. It's titled Criteria for Approval of a Variance.
And which page is that on?
And I believe that the specific page
Is maybe 23?
23. Page 23.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's under the section that is number 12, rebuilding of an existing dwelling unit, and that outlines the different standards in regards to a rebuild within the shoreline setback area.
Is that in our pages here?
25,
25, okay.
criteria for approval of a variance.
Okay, right here. Criteria for approval. So what I'm,
Page 26 has the specific
Yeah.
section on.
Yeah, so page 26 is where the specific section is, and it goes into page 27. And
okay,
this bill is not changing anything in regards to the process of needing to obtain a variance. The only change that it does do is that if you minimize the front yard setback and the side setback to the maximum extent possible, and you still cannot cite a dwelling unit MALCA of the shoreline setback, then this proposed bill does change the minimum buildable footprint from 1,000 square feet to 500 square feet. So that's the only change that this proposed bill is.
so there's a very significant change.
Only if you can't move it out?
So when I'm giving that example of, you know what I'm talking about in Kalapaki, where if you look, and it would be nicer if there weren't those houses there, honestly, but they're like, I mean, no offense to the people who have the houses there, but those are like wooden houses. They look like they're on stilts. They're all along that cliff line next to the hotel. So one of the houses is one of those that I'm getting a concern on. So that can't move inland. It can't move anywhere. And to put a 500 square foot house right there, that wouldn't even make sense, right? So that, is this saying that they couldn't rebuild? I'm just trying to really, because I've been sitting here looking at this and talking with the individual and trying to see, and we did look on this page, 500 square feet. First of all, it would be out of compliance with everything there, but 500 square feet for a family with growing children and teenagers and stuff like that would be very difficult. So we're saying that they could only have 500 square feet with this?
We would have to look at the specific property. I don't know the actual lot depths of the particular property in question.
Do you know where I'm talking about? Can you visualize it?
I'm aware of the Kalapaki developments on the cliff line.
Yeah. So they would be able to have, 500 square foot little piece right at the very top, maybe?
So again, in order to look at specific properties, we'd have to detail the property itself. So I don't want to say like, oh, Kalapaki, yes, is subject to this, but if a property is entirely within a setback, then indeed, under the draft bill, the only variance that they could get for rebuilding of a structure, if it was demolished, would be a 500 square foot.
So that's what we came up with together when we were looking at it. And so an additional problem, for example, for that, when I say young family, they're probably your age, okay? It's young for me, right? And they have a mortgage in that example. So this change could potentially call their mortgage. So when we call a mortgage, that means the lender says you got to pay up now, right? So in that case, it's the perception of that particular family that if we pass this bill, they're going to basically lose their home. Because whether their house burns down or doesn't burn down, they can't keep it insured, and the mortgage isn't going to want to have this challenge. So do you have any statements on that?
I don't think we have a statement on how a lending institution provides services to coastal development. I don't. I can say that, the intent around the setback laws as originally drafted is recognizing that there are coastal hazards and coastal processes at play, as well as public access processes at play, whether that shoreline is an erodible sandy shoreline or whether that shoreline is a rocky shoreline. And by virtue of the setback, whether it's from coastal hazard processes or the conflict that often happens between private property owners and the public sector that are in close proximity to the shoreline, is the intent of the ordinance, and having the ability prior to the ordinance to have rampant development rights in a global speculative market for landowners to develop right adjacent to the shoreline. That conflict point, whether it was from coastal hazards or public processes, was what the original ordinance was trying to address. And so having the variance in there is essentially the constitutional relief valve saying, okay, they're not supposed to be building in this area because either from a hazard standpoint or a public access standpoint, it will create conflict. But recognizing we live in America and are beholden to the constitutional property rights, that relief valve was set up to say, like, okay, if your property is entirely in a setback, you're going to have, we, the county, are going to have to allow some economic utility out of that property. And what was arrived at with the council and the administration 15 some odd years when this original ordinance was adopted is that 1,000 square feet is economic utility, while at the same time recognizing we don't want to fully push on creating greater value in this hazardous area or in this area that conflicts with public access. So that's where 1,000 square feet essentially came from. Recognizing, I think, that value still creates conflict between the hazard point or as well as public access. I think the original proposal to go down to 500 square feet, the department feels it has merit in that it still goes towards, there's still economic utility of the property, and there is still a recognition of those conflicts occurring.
So, go ahead.
Oh, and if I may, because like Kaina said, we would have to assess the particular parcel that you're speaking about, but there is a section in not only the proposed bill, but in the existing ordinance within section 8-27.3, where it says
Let me find it, 8-7.
27.3. It's titled Shoreline Setback Determination Establishment of the Shoreline Setback Line.
And what page is it on?
Mine says 10, but I don't know if it's different for you guys.
Page 10, okay. Okay, 23, you said, no. Okay.
Yes, and it says shoreline setback determination shall be issued based on the following procedures. And beneath that, it says a shoreline setback determination shall be required for all structures and subdivisions proposed on lands covered by this article, except in the following two cases. And if you look at the second case, it does say that there can be planning director discretion based on different factors to consider, and this also includes things such as topography, elevation, history of coastal hazards in the area. So I did want to point that out because you did mention the Kalapaki area, and I thought that could potentially add to the discussion.
So that, and I'm just curious if there was any outreach to that element, because like, I wouldn't have thought of it if I hadn't got, and we all got the testimony from that person. So, and then I was speaking with him yesterday and trying to work on this. So when we look at that cliffside there, I'm just guessing there's probably about 20 houses along that. Does that sound about right to you guys? So I did actually try and call an insurance person. I tried to look on this. But like if we were to look at that whole space right there, if they all had their mortgages called, presuming that at least some of them have mortgages, we might have all those people lose their homes. I guess they could sell to a cash buyer and it would be okay, because there's nothing in this bill that's saying those houses have to come down, right? Nothing in the bill says the houses that have to come down. What would be that is if they have the mortgage called. And regularly I hear from constituents who have problems from changes in county policy and their mortgage does get called, or the stuff becomes too untenable for them, so they have to sell their house. And so I don't want to be having an unintended consequence of causing, a row of houses to have to go up for sale to non-residents, to people who have enough cash that maybe they want to do it and take that risk of potentially no insurance, right? Because why would you insure something when it can't be rebuilt? Well, I guess if you didn't have a debt, it doesn't matter, right? It's just the loss on the homeowner.
Council members, does anyone else have any questions for admin?
Can I follow up?
Yeah, because I have a number of questions. Please.
I'm just
go around.
wondering-
That's not just my only question.
While Councilmember Collin is discussing that, it seems quite clear that this section here, where the applicant can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the planning director that the applicant's proposed structure or subdivision will not affect beach processes, impact public beach access, or be affected by or contribute to coastal erosion or hazards, including natural disasters. To me, it seems quite clear that this high elevated cliff would clearly meet these kind of requirements, which makes me feel like this is established to protect those types of individuals. I mean, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, no, it is. And to my recollection, we have done one determination for one of the Kalapaki homes that did exempt it from review. It did.
And I just also want to add to consideration for the council that, this is in place to do that particular review. But the reason why it's on discretion and there's that review process is because there can also be rocky areas or cliff areas that could experience undercutting. And so it is important to have an analysis, because you don't want a situation where, there could be destabilization of the slope. And so it is like on a more like parcel by parcel basis, just to ensure that there's that analysis that takes place.
Great. Any other, Councilmember?
Just a clarification, but the onus would be on the property owner to prove to the department or to the director that there is no undermining. It's not for the county to go and use county resources to make that determination, correct?
Correct. And thinking of the Kalapaki analysis that was done, and there was actually a sandy beach in front of that proposal. It's elevated, but the sandy beach, they did hire an engineer to demonstrate that any erosion of the sandy beach would not affect the cliff line itself.
In that case, if there's a 1,500...
Put your mic on.
A 1,500-foot structure on that cliff side, and it burns down, and you guys apply this process and determine that it's not a threat, that house could be rebuilt to the 1,500 square feet, even though it's within that shoreline setback, correct?
I want to speak in general terms because I haven't assessed and analyzed the specific property I think everybody seems to be referring to. It could.
Okay, thank you.
Council members, any additional questions? Councilmember Godin?
I have plenty of questions, but nobody else has any questions on this bill?
I mean, what I'm hearing, I'll make sure what I'm hearing is that the process or the existing law or proposed law will afford that property owner the opportunity to rebuild should he successfully prove that there is no hazard to that parcel. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
If that's what it is, then I'm satisfied.
I'm just trying to be clear. Am I hearing when that house burns down and then it's assessed that they can rebuild, they would have to rebuild to the 500 feet, correct? But I wasn't quite sure if I understood it right.
And as well, I know we're all talking about one specific property. I haven't assessed that one specific property, so I'm being very careful not to say.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to review this in general terms because this is not an ordinance for one property.
I know, but the reason why I'm giving that example, I could give other examples. The reason why I'm giving that example is that it's really important that when we make changes in rules and laws, that we don't have it have these unintended consequences, because that happens regularly. You know, maybe it's just 2 or 3 people who cannot stay in their house any longer over the next 2 or 3 years. But I'm just trying to look to see if there's some way that we are able to effectively plan and address that, because when I see people lose their houses and they have these mortgage callbacks, I'm not seeing that that was ever the intention in how we determined the bill, but it is the outcome. So that's why I'm trying to be careful on that. Another element.
I would just like to say, and perhaps we could speak with a financial institution that is giving those comments, in that we have heard also property owners explain that county policy dictates insurance premiums and policies. And when we talk to the insurance industry, they kind of a little bit laughed at us and said, our maps are 10 times more sophisticated than your maps. The laws you pass do not dictate who we give premiums to and what our rates are at. Actuarial science is well beyond zoning policy. And so even though it might be, you know, a statement that somebody's making, oh, it's because the policy is being adopted, the financial institutions are changing their lending capabilities, I would still want to say, like, we'd want to talk to the financial institutions to see if that actually warrants merit, or if that's just being stated matter-of-factly when in fact it's not affecting it.
So can we do that between now and next week?
It would depend. I'd be curious to what financial institution was saying that, and we can reach out to any financial institution.
Yeah, I think we should just look, because I'm appreciating what you're saying, that while what they do, they're lending on is granular, it's maybe not that granular, where they go, well, you can only put back a 500 square foot house. Maybe they wouldn't notice that. But if I was a mortgage owner, and I've been one, I wouldn't want to lend to something that can't rebuild.
Yeah, if you can let us know what financial institution is making those statements, we would absolutely reach out to them.
Okay, I'll try and reach out some too, because I'm just trying to be, okay, so I have another one. And that is the 125,000 in section 5, item F. So it says, a certified state shoreline survey is required for any repairs exceeding 125,000 and shall be included in the application for a shoreline setback determination. I need to find where it is here, but what established that $125,000 limit?
So in the definition of minor structures are defined as being less than 125,000. So it was determined that that could be an appropriate cost threshold for identifying higher value repair projects.
So if we have I'm just going to make up a number, she used it, a 1,500 square foot house that is within the setback area, it's an existing house. If they repair that house, they can't repair for more than $125,000?
No, they can.
Okay, help me understand that then.
What you can't do is you can't rebuild a structure. So rebuilding a structure will constitute essentially a new development in the setback. And so rebuilding is prohibited in the setback, and the rebuild is established by 50% of the assessed value of that rebuild on the market. The $125,000 as proposed in the draft ordinance is just say, you can still repair the structure, but if you're going to repair at a certain threshold, and right now it's proposed at $125,000, in tandem with that repair, you're also going to do a survey of your shoreline.
So just as an example, my house, I have a Hicks home that I bought in 2001 for $200,000. Good deal, actually. But I had to put $185,000 into repairs of that without changing the footprint at all. Had to replace all the electric, all the water, had to tear out the, I had asbestos stuff in there and lead-based paint and all that. So I spent $185,000 repairing that house to move into it on the very same footprint, and that was 25 years ago. So when I look at this $125,000 for repairs, is what I did then when I didn't put new walls in, I didn't change the structure, would that have not been qualified as a repair?
It'd be qualified as a repair. You just have, if you were on a shoreline abutting property, you'd also have to do a survey with that repair. So you could do it. It just would need to be accompanied by a shoreline survey.
So it's not like building so this is a simple repair, and that number that I'm giving is again 25 years ago. So when we pick a number like this, 125,000, when we look at how old is this number? Is this from the original bill that we're updating? We didn't change that number.
So this is just coming from the definition of what is considered a minor structure. So a minor structure is defined as being a structure that is less than 125,000. And really what this $125,000 trigger is to mandate that if you're doing a repair project, you would also have to get a state certified shoreline survey. And the reason for this is that it is good to keep the cost threshold as low as possible because this has been an issue in terms of demarcating the boundary between public beach areas and private property. So by having a certified shoreline, this allows us to be able to demarcate what is the public beach and what is private property.
So I understand what a certified shoreline is, but thank you for making that really clear, and I am very supportive of wanting to have, so this is a way to force people to do a shoreline setback, a state shoreline survey. It's forcing it rather than really having anything to do with the nature of the repair, if it's just something simple interior to the house. So what we're trying to do is find any reason to force that repair, that shoreline survey.
It depends on the vocabulary used. I don't know if I would couch it as we're forcing a shoreline owner, but it could be couched as that. I think the premise of that policy as drafted is that if you are going to live on the shoreline and routinely maintain your house, and yes, it is maintenance of your house, we have seen over the past several decades continuous conflict between private property owners and public access, and the public being pushed off the very beaches that they're entitled to access. And by virtue of also putting it on the public access person to demonstrate to the police that they're not trespassing. And so the thrust of this bill, and I'll be honest, I didn't come up with it. And I thought it was a brilliant move. And when I first saw it, I was kind of like, can we do that? Like, is there a nexus to do that? And being reviewed by the attorney's office, finding that there is a nexus in the couch of, what's come before this body a few times about, public access and the state's either inability or unwillingness to continuously survey that shoreline to demarcate where the public boundary is. This proposal will get a large chunk of now certified shorelines that will demarcate where the public can actually go, and as opposed to be pushed off of that beach and the onus put on them. So, I don't know if couches, it's forcing a landowner so much as if you're going to live on the shoreline or have an asset on the shoreline and maintain it, you're also going to be able to be demarcating to the public where they can actually go now.
So I appreciate all that, and I know Karen, who's helped us. 30 years ago, I've called her to help look at where all this was happening right in Honolulu. It's a chronic problem, so of encroachment on the public space. So you have no argument from me there. I'm just wanting to really be clear. How much does it cost to do a shoreline survey? Do you have any idea?
It would depend on the survey.
A range, 10,000, 50,000?
It could be 10,000.
But that's not too much. It could be 100,000?
It again depends on the survey.
All right. And
Council
then,
members, any other additional questions? Sorry. Do you have more questions?
yeah,
Okay,
I'm
keep
definitely not done. I'm
Keep
not
going.
finished. So I'm just wanting to make sure we've fluffed to the surface and we've thought about this. Seeing her smile, okay. But these are important questions. Okay. So what I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about individuals that I know whose houses are rotting in disrepair. Mine, arguably, is the same thing. I have a 75-year-old wooden house that constantly takes something. So I just wondering if what we're saying is if you live in a beat-up old house, we're going to just wait till it falls apart and then you're going to have to sell it. I mean, I just want to be clear what our goal is here. I'm not saying, maybe we're willing to do that. Because I see how these houses get bought and they're rebuilt and they're repaired and it turns into a very nice, huge house with landscaping that takes over the beach. So I'm on page with the intention here. I'm just trying to look at where we have what's left of fishing villages or little fishing houses. How, to repair them, it's going to cost that much just to repair them. And so and they need to have a smaller house, right? If they're going to repair, they have to, or they can repair on their existing footprint.
Correct.
Okay. And an existing footprint, if there was something that took it down to the concrete and the rebar, they don't belong there any longer. Is that what we're learning there? Because when we have shoreline, certainly a wave action, if it goes down to the concrete and the rebar, it shouldn't be rebuilt there anyway. That's what this is saying.
If it's in the setback.
Okay, what if it's beyond 60 feet and a wave comes and hits it and knocks it down?
You will have storm events that occur. And if it takes out a structure that is located outside of the setback, that structure can be proposed and rebuilt as well as it existed.
So when I watched on television this weekend, or on things that come from television, we had houses fall into rivers, houses fall into the shoreline, some stuff right along the Kona Strip there, where the restaurant fell apart. if that restaurant was here, would they be able to rebuild, or they wouldn't be able to rebuild?
Again, the setback line demarcates where a no-build zone is. And in essence, much of the setback line is derived from coastal erosion processes and how coastal erosion will essentially take land away through erosion, and therefore the structure that's located in that setback will not be allowed to rebuild. But again, I can't just speak in hypotheticals, because you will have storm events that take out structures that are not within the setback. So if a storm event takes out a structure that's in the setback, it is accurate that if there's only a property within the setback, then it needs to get a variance to rebuild or to put a 1,000 square foot structure. If a storm event takes out a structure that is not located within the shoreline setback area, that structure can be rebuilt.
Okay, so when we saw Hurricane Iniki, I don't know if you're old enough for that one, I don't know if either one of you are, but it went into Poipu. We saw how Brenikes, even in this rain, lost its sand. That road right there was on people's living rooms. I remember the yellow line was on people's couches. But in that case, they would be able to rebuild across the street from the beach in Poipu, right there at Brenikes.
We would have to take a look at where the setback is. And you know, I think when Iniki happened, and it speaks to the overall intent of the bill, just as general, right, is that there have been catastrophic events in the past where certainly the disposition of whichever municipality was to allow these places to rebuild. When you look at the increasing intensity and frequency that we now see with storms, you know, post Iniki in a climate change understood world, the idea of rebuilding back where these hazards took structures out, right, it's not necessarily appropriate to continue to allow structures to be rebuilt back in these hazardous zones at both the cost of federal taxpayer dollars as well as the cost that it has on, again, going back to the public access issues.
I'm going to agree with that, and we've just come back from NACO, National Association of Counties, and repeatedly in NACO events. We have a lot of that conversation about when nature takes things out, it's sometimes time to stop arguing, right? So you're not getting arguments with me on that one. I would say those are my questions for these guys. If Karen would like to come up, I'm happy to hear from her too, if that is appropriate, if nobody else has any questions.
Council members, any additional questions for administration? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council members, do you have any discussion at the moment? We have a request for our resource person to have some questions. So if you have any questions for Karen. Karen, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and I would like to say thank you for all the work that you've done. And
Councilmember Tan, go ahead.
okay, sorry. Thank you for all the work that you've done. Do you have additional comments on this? I appreciate that we talked for about an hour yesterday after I talked to these concerns. So is there anything you would like to share with us?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Karen Diamond. I guess I'll address the certified shoreline part first. And, you know, our coastal zone management laws, including our shoreline setback laws, are dictated from 205A, which are state laws. And the state tasks the state with doing the certified shoreline and tasks the county with setting the setback from that certified shoreline. It's not an arbitrary line that the county does. And so right now, the way the county existing ordinance reads, the landowner themselves looks at a Google map, they're instructed to look at the Google map, see the edge of vegetation, make a line there, and then draw a line to where the house is going to be proposed or is. And then that is the distance of the setback. And in doing so, they're giving away immense amounts of what are public trust lands, what is the beach. And, you know, we have huge amounts of problems across the state with vegetation overgrowth onto the beach. The edge of vegetation is not the shoreline. And so the way the county shoreline setback rules is now, it completely obliterates the state's jurisdiction on certified shorelines. In 1972, our shoreline setback law required certified shorelines first, and then the county would do a setback. And so we're going backwards in not requiring certified shorelines. And that's the issue that this is trying to fix by putting the 125, which actually is quite a bit of repairs if you're looking at a house on the beachfront. And we have to talk about whether they're non-conforming houses or conforming houses. So our federal flood laws got enacted in 1981. And houses are supposed to be set up high to the base flood elevation. And so when houses are repaired, if they are doing excessive repairs that is not in the, that is more than the 50%, they really do need to comply with federal flood laws and county setback laws. And it'll mitigate coastal hazards that these landowners face. It'll add to health, safety, and welfare of the people who are in those structures. It'll protect public access along our beach. And these things are necessary. Allowing, when you're talking about your house being 70 years old, the whole ordinance is written in a way of a 70-year time frame, that being the life of a structure, which is the average life of structures. And the erosion rate is based on that. So to allow people to keep rebuilding brand new houses and not establishing where the public is allowed to go really impacts not only our public access and the public trust, but it impacts the wastewater. So most of these houses, as they are doing any kind of repairs, they all have to upgrade their cesspools. And how does the health department know where water is, where the ocean is, if there's no certified shoreline? The edge of vegetation is not the same thing, and that results in pollution to our public trust areas and to the ocean. It's a nightmare for Department of Health. And so requiring certified shorelines really does help everybody. It costs $75 to apply for a certified shoreline with the state. And they have a whole process laid out. The laws in HIR 13-222 lay out the process for how people get certified shorelines, how it's done. It doesn't take long when it's done right. There's site inspections and public participation in all of it. There's really a good practice and a good process. And then the county's responsibility is from that certified shoreline to then do the setback. And so nobody is saying anybody can't rebuild at all. Everybody can repair their houses to less than the 50%, which those laws come from the federal flood laws. They're not made up. The way the county setback ordinance got involved in that is when an exemption got put in, so that if you are, quote, repairing your house, you're exempt from shoreline setback laws. And that's resulted in an exemption from the flood laws, from our shoreline certification laws, from our setback laws, from wastewater laws. It's resulted in really poor planning and putting people and structures at risk. And so this is designed to help that. And the other issue, when you talked about the rocky shoreline and the house not being able to be rebuilt, just like Fern had read and Alicia had said, 827.3 has the exemption that's already laid out for the director. If there are no coastal hazards, then they get that exemption and they can rebuild their house where it is. If there are coastal hazards, it doesn't serve anybody, most especially the landowner, to put a house where it's going to be at risk of being falling down again. And so I think I don't support either amendment and I think that the existing ordinance already covers, the director can make that exemption if it's warranted, and as he said, he actually has made that exemption in that spot. And so,
Council members, do you have any questions?
Yeah, first of all, Karen, thank you. And thank you for a couple of field trips that you took me on, which really showed the need for this ordinance. But regarding the shoreline certification, I was just curious, because you've been doing this for a long time. The state won't do one by the request of the community or?
No, only a landowner has
Yeah.
the right to ask
That is
for a
the
certified
most
shoreline.
bizarre. In Anini, we had I'm not mentioning names, and you guys all know what I'm talking about, extending the operation into the beach. And there was a dispute on where the shoreline was. So I asked our county, I think Kaina might remember, Kaina went out and issued the violation, which was appreciated, but we were not able to do or require them to do a shoreline certification. I sent the formal request to the state, and they told me sorry. So it makes no sense. So this $125,000 would trigger the landowner to do the shoreline certification, which is sorely overdue on that, especially out there on the North Shore. I was just curious if you had a better way or the trick, the hack that would get the state to come in and do a shoreline.
Well, on every TMK map and on every property, it says shoreline boundary follows along the high water mark. And that high water mark, you don't really need a certified shoreline for that to be public area below that. The high water mark does define where the public can go. And so areas below the high water mark are public trust areas. And I know we can't force the state to do certified shorelines, but the public has a right below the high water, and it's up to everybody to exercise that right.
But wouldn't you agree that it would be in the state's best interest in preservation of that public trust that they would regularly conduct shoreline certifications?
In places like Wainiha subdivision, which was completely undeveloped, we tried really hard to get the state to do a whole subdivision-wide certified shoreline, and the state just doesn't go
Incredible.
there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other additional questions? Councilmember Calvayo?
Push your button.
On our visit too as well, when walking through the access areas and how it kind of like was overdone in a different way and not accessible. And then the shoreline area with the alpaca, kind of growing out onto the beach area. I mean, I just wanted to lay that out for the people, that it's important, this discussion, right? We went through all of that, and that was interesting to see that as well. And how it took away, by the time you get to the beach, you're already in the water, So to me, this is an important area of discussion. So that was good.
I agree with you. It's really important. And vegetative overgrowth and encroachments is something when the state does a certified shoreline, it addresses the encroachments onto the public beach. It makes landowners clear up the encroachments. And so the whole process works to protect the public trust.
Any additional questions, council members? Councilmember?
Yeah. I also appreciated when we went and looked at the shoreline. And I have lived along that shoreline quite a long time ago. But over time, so much of the beach has been taken. And I thank you for when you've done that with me in Honolulu. And I was definitely one of the driving forces on what was happening at Anini. And I will own that I live on the North Shore. And my life, 42 years, have been up here. Has there been similar problems in Keikaha, which is now gentrifying? Hanapepe, have we heard from these other communities? Certainly, Aliumanu has gentrified. Are you hearing input from those areas, or are there similar challenges of that beach encroachment by vegetation?
Well, I think, Keikaha has different issues because there's a seawall there, and so I haven't been there in a very long time.
Okay. And then when we looked at this, I have one more question. When we looked at this together, when you first did it, what I was disappointed in is it didn't do enough on the vegetation. Can you help me understand? Because the vegetation is some of the biggest taking, and it happens with clear intention, and people plant right on the sand, and they bring in everything they need, and even irrigation that goes on the sand. I've watched it.
So your amendment that you're thinking about in not requiring certified shorelines works against that. The only way that vegetation encroachments get cleared up is by the state doing a certified shoreline and by the state enforcing on the encroachments that are there. And the county doesn't have any rights for enforcement on the state beach. And so it's not the county's responsibility to clear vegetative encroachments. And in fact, the way the shoreline bill is written right now, it uses those to give the beach to the private landowner.
Yeah.
And that's why that certified shoreline requirement is so important.
Okay, well, I'm appreciating your feedback, and when I'm doing this, on this, I wanted on the record all these answers. And when I have pre-written some amendments in case, it seems to me it's pretty clear, none of the rest of the group wanted to discuss those. What I wanted to do was discuss them. That's why I haven't even submitted them yet. I want this for the people who are afraid to testify themselves, surprising how many people don't want to raise their hand, that they can watch this and see this and understand what the answers are and why. So I suppose I should say the whys in closing comments. I mean, it seems like what's on page 26, if I have the memory right, is whatever lets it, I probably got the wrong page now, but do you remember offhand, Karen, where is it that it says that the planning director can do the variance?
It's 827.3 at the beginning.
827.3.
0.3. I think it's on page 9. It's small a too.
Page. Okay. So I am basically speaking for this number of people who called me. So I'm wanting them to hear the answer that they needed to hear, that I don't think I was sufficient enough to give them. But I feel like a good answer has been given. And yeah, here I have it starred now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Diamond? Mahalo.
Thank you.
Council members, any more discussion before I do testimony, public testimony?
I have discussion, but should we wait till after the testimony? Yeah, let's wait till after.
Since the rules are suspended, any public testimony? Do we have any registered speakers? Come on up.
For the record, Lonnie Sykos. The public's great thanks to Karen for her decades of work on this issue. Listening to this, I have a comment for all of our elected to state office officials, Mr. Senator Kochi, all the rest of you. They pass housing bills that are utterly useless because they don't address sewage, they don't address roads, and yet this is something that's been ongoing. I've lived in Hawaii for 50 years, and this has been an issue for 50 years, which is the shoreline setback and the protection of the public's rights of both access into the property itself. And so one of the issues that the county sits here and grapples with is the utter failure of our legislature to do its job. And our state constitution says that our legislature has an obligation to the future generations. And yet, decade after decade after decade, our state officials fail to address this shoreline setback. And so this, as you guys know, this has enormous impact in all manner of areas. And so what you need to do is put pressure on Senator Kochi, on Nadine, on Dee, on Luke, that the state needs to get DLNR to do their job. And part of their job is we need a current map of shoreline setback for the entire state. And so, hey, elected officials, I will actively campaign against you if you don't address this issue. This has been ongoing for decades. I want to thank our planning department because, once again, they're being asked to deal with issues and have done a great job, but they're state problems, not county problems. So I'm very supportive of this, but ultimately the resolution is going to be in getting DLNR to do their job. Thank you.
Stay back there.
Aloha. I am Maka'ala Kaumawana, and today I am here on behalf of Hui Ho'omaluika Aina. You seldom hear me testify on their behalf, but they are the cultural group that I bring into the room today. And I bring in Jackie Hashimoto and some of our fishermen. But, Chair, I would request that you ask Aina and Alicia to present their presentation prior to my testimony, prior to any other testimony. They have not done their presentation. They prepared one, and I would like to hear their presentation. Mahalo.
Any other testimony? Since the rules are still suspended. Admin, I totally forgot that you could have a presentation. Oh, apologize. Administration, would you like to come on up? As per testifier, I totally forgot to allow you to reintroduce your your 2,000-page PowerPoint that you presented. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Oh, fun.
30-minute video. No.
Thank you, Maka'ala. No, Alicia did prepare a presentation. It's not a PowerPoint, but a presentation to go over the broad policy perspective of the draft ordinance and her and eventually the Planning Commission's analysis of it. So I'll turn it over to Alicia.
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity for this presentation. I was eagerly awaiting to do. But good morning, and the proposed bill you guys have on your desk today is Bill 2984. As we were talking about earlier, it amends the Shoreline Setback and Coastal Protection Ordinance in our CZO, Chapter 8, Article 27 of the Kauai County Code. And really the purpose of this bill is to strengthen our existing shoreline setback regulations to better address the risks associated with development in coastal areas. As you all are aware, these areas are increasingly vulnerable to hazards such as high surf, coastal flooding, erosion, sea level rise, and studies looking at historical shoreline change have found that 71% of Kauai's beaches are eroding, and climate change projections also indicate that by 2050, average shoreline recession may be nearly double that estimated through historical trends. So really improving how and where structures are sited, the county can take much more proactive approach to protect public safety, to reduce our exposure to coastal hazards, and importantly, to preserve our vital beach and coastal resources. So I'm not going to walk through every amendment that's in the proposed bill today, but I do want to highlight a few of the more notable ones, including the ones that we were discussing today. So one of the main key amendments focuses on updated requirements for the repair of lawfully existing structures. So in practice, distinguishing between what qualifies as a repair versus a substantial improvement can be quite difficult, And this has really been an ongoing challenge for the department. There's various reasons as to why this is a challenge. For example, project costs are typically estimated before construction begins, but those estimates can often change over time. In some cases, cost reporting may be incomplete, or it may be inaccurate, or there may be unreported changes to the project scope during construction. It can also be especially challenging to track costs when projects are completed in phases over time. So this is not just a theoretical issue. We've seen it come up in real situations, including, on the North Shore. So to really address these challenges, the bill introduces several updated requirements. This includes requiring the applicant to provide an appraisal of the structure that accounts for depreciation by submitting a detailed cost breakdown for the proposed repair work, notifying the department when the project is completed, along with any additional costs incurred, and allowing the director to request receipts associated with the project. These amendments will really provide us with stronger administrative tools to ensure that what is proposed as a repair does not, in effect, function as a substantial improvement that circumvents our shoreline protection regulations. And in addition to this, the bill also includes several other important updates. So some of these other amendments includes new and revised definitions to improve the clarity and consistency in how the ordinance is applied. It also updates our shoreline setback calculations, and I do want to emphasize it is maintaining the 60-foot minimum setback, but what this proposed bill does do is that it incorporates an additional 20-foot safety buffer into the average lot depth calculation to better account for coastal hazards. The bill also requires the certified shoreline surveys for repair projects, which we were discussing earlier, when it's exceeding $125,000 in repairs, and this helps to clearly define our shoreline boundaries. It also has a retreat agreement in there, so for properties that are threatened by sea level rise or historical coastal erosion, the bill requires property owners to enter into retreat agreements. And these agreements really ensure that structures will be relocated or removed before or when the shoreline actually reaches them. Additionally, the bill shortens the timeline for initiating and completing construction, and this is to encourage more timely, risk-informed development. And additionally, it reduces the minimum buildable footprint for the construction of a new dwelling unit or the rebuilding in the shoreline setback area. And this is really to help limit the scale of development in places that are really most at risk. So this proposed bill is building upon several actions that the county has already been taking to address climate impacts. For example, in 2014, we had the update to incorporate erosion-based setbacks. And then in 2022, we had the adoption of the Sea Level Rise Constraint District. It's also advancing our county's general plan policies, which explicitly call for integrating climate change considerations into land use and development decisions. So overall, this proposed bill is strengthening our shoreline protections. It's helping to reduce our long-term risk, and it's also improving regulatory implementation. So thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing us space for our presentation. And we appreciate all the great questions and the great work that you guys have been putting into this. Mahalo.
Thank you. Councilmember Raposo, any additional questions?
Thank you for that. I think you clarified a lot of the reasons why we need the ordinance. My question is, thanks to Karen again, I had the opportunity to see or to look at several permits that were done over the years that Karen graciously showed me the property that these permits were applied for repairs. And it wasn't a repair. It was a complete rebuild. They're saying the estimate maybe 100,000 or 125,000, but they've probably spent 700,000 or 800,000 to rebuild this structure. Currently, in our ordinance, we don't have the ability to challenge them or, this clarifies a lot of that, so this is sorely needed, but as far as the people that have done that in the past, what's the remedy for the county under existing ordinances? Because it's fraud, clearly fraud, and it's just insane on how they got away with it.
Yeah, when Karen, Ms. Diamond, and others brought this to our attention, we were in agreement, like with some of the stuff that had gone on under the auspices of repair were clearly egregious. In one scenario, I recall they were doing expansion of footprint, so we issued a notice of violation immediately on that. There's actually been a couple where they had expansion footprints in it, and were easily able, within the authority of the ordinance, to issue a notice of violation and withstand what we believe any judicial scrutiny. For when they weren't expanding the footprint, but then they're doing what appears to be a lot more than what was originally exempted under repair, it's a bit harder to be able to scrutinize from the department standpoint of, okay, well, what were the cost figure analysis that went into these repairs? Since Karen has brought this to our attention, we've begun in a de facto manner already implementing what's in the draft ordinance, in that we are requiring contractors to now provide cost estimates and receipts, if we recall them. So we think it's a good practice. We haven't been tested on it, and quite honestly, we don't have explicit authority to require these receipts come back to us. So we're trying to put it in play already, based off of, I think, quite honestly, Chair, what you and Councilmember Carvalho and Ms. Diamond have come up with. So that's how we're responding, but I think we clearly need it articulated in the ordinance.
I guess that's the final question is, this new language will give you that.
It'll give us the final authority.
Legally defensible authority.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mahalo for your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks, Alicia.
Open it back for public testimony. Yeah, perfect.
Aloha, Chair Raposo and Honorable County Council. Haole Lahano. My name is Presley Wan, and my ohana has had a kuleana in Ha'ena since time immemorial. I'm a strong supporter of the Bill 2984. I'm 77 years old, and I've been in the ocean as long as I can remember. I've seen and felt and even smelt the changes in our ocean. Our shorelines are eroding. There's no question. Our shorelines have been properties, have been a commodity, especially in the last 50 years. I paid $100,000 in property tax in the last 30 years. So this bill addresses all my concerns as a fisherman and an advocate of the Ha'ena community-based subsistence fishing area in many ways. As a former Kauai Nihau Island Burial Council member under both Governors Cayetano and Lingo, I've been aware of the alarming rate of kupuna iwi being exposed. Lastly, all our beaches, erosion is in the saying, the answer to the future is in the past. So our kupuna knew better. They rarely built on the ocean, the shorelines. They would have their holly for their fish nets. They would have their holly for their fishing canoes. But you look at all the kuleanas, they're up Mauka, they're out of the that beach because they knew better. So by not following the setback rules, we're not allowing the beach sand and nature to do its thing, and to migrate with the tides and the winds. It is a kuleana of Keakua to live on the shoreline, but we take a chance that kuleana could be taken away. So mahalo for this opportunity to express my manao. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha. I'm Maka'ala Kaumawana. Mahalo, Chair, for allowing them to do their presentation. I think there was some key information in that. And mahalo to all of you who have visited the site, some of you who have lived there, and some of you who have generational knowledge of this place. Again, I'm testifying today with a strange hat, with a different hat. This is Hui Ho'omalu Ika'aina. It was established in the early 1980s to respond to the pressures of commercialization of Hanalei tour boats. And we do have standing in court. We've been successful in several lawsuits. We're not a 501c3 intentionally. And we consist of fishers and farmers and weavers and those who understand the place where they live and remember, most of us are fairly old now, remember what it used to be like. Presley and I happen to be classmates, but if there's a moment to catch your breath, to go out and see some of what is there now and allow yourself to think about what could be and what should be, and the absolute audacity and lack of understanding and knowledge of a place before you encroach, before you build. I want to remind us all that the accesses were intentionally just wide enough to take our small fishing boat that held our nets for pa'ipai. They weren't big boats. We could carry them 2 people, and they weren't wide boats, right? So even us, when we did the beach accesses, the designs, and put the pole in the middle so we could huli the boat and get it around the pole and you couldn't drive, that was all us. That was all us saying, no, we're going to limit ourselves. We're going to make this just for the practices that are important to these places, and that limit the number of fish, limit the take. So the public trust doctrine and all of that simply puts on paper those things that Presley and I will both refer to as the guidance of Kaua, and that's what this is about. This is about doing what's right. Is it always cheap? Nope. Is it always easy? Nope. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be right. And we mahalo you, all of us, for listening to this and for working with Karen, who has dedicated her life to this work. When she says she knows where the shoreline is, she get the pictures. Mahalo.
Anyone wishing to testify, please come up. For the second time.
For the record, Lonnie Sykos. Hello, Council. Of the issues not being discussed today, and one for the future, I started out in Hawaii as a charter boat deckhand at Kewalo Basin, and it was my great blessing that the boat tied up opposite me on the pier was captained by Bill Shinsato, who was probably in his 70s when I was 19. And Bill pointed out to me that in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, there was an aku fishery so close to Waikiki Beach that the tourists could watch them jack-pole the aku into the back of the aku boats. As they developed Waikiki and built high-rises, Bill and everybody noticed that at night, the light shined out on the water, and all the bait got killed because it was full moon every night, and the aku moved offshore. And so by the early 70s, when I started fishing, if you wanted to catch a 30 or 40 pound aku, you needed to go out to the 1,000 fathom ledge, which was 22 miles offshore at its closest point. And so one of the things that's not ever addressed is the impact on the inshore waters from the electrification of the shoreline at night. Because you put enough light onto the ocean, every single night is full moon. And so the whole ecosystem based on moon cycle and the deep water stuff rising to the surface, you end up wiping out the wildlife close to shore. So future thought is, how do we limit not just the lights that negatively impact the birds, but it also negatively impacts all of the fishery that's near shore. So food for thought for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone wishing to testify? Seeing none, I'll call this meeting back to order. Council members, final discussion. Anyone wants to go first? Councilor Cooley.
I can be very brief. I just wanted to express my deepest gratitude to everyone from the community, especially the leaders that we have here, for all their work over the years. This is the latest in the most important bills to further strengthen what little rights and protections we as a county can try to do for our Aina. And it's so important, and I have a very easy time supporting this. I know that a lot of thought has gone into every phrase that's in here, and maybe as we go forward we'll even find even further ways, but this is really important to do right now and to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Holland.
Thank you. So I really appreciate the discussion, the presentation, the information. For me, I'm in strong support of this measure and have been from the beginning. I think, as all of us have discussed, we've all watched in our lifetimes the erosion of our public spaces and our shorelines. I think it's pretty evident. We've all seen it. I'm a very big advocate for public access, and I really believe that that coastal access is critically important. I feel really good about the 827.3 determination allowing for this discretion to be taken for these cases where there is no erosion risk, public beach access threats, or hazards. And I think that's a very fair and important part of this measure. I also think that, at some point there is a risk associated with building on the shoreline, and if those cliffs do start to erode, safety obviously comes first. In the case of, for example, what we saw in Iao Valley this week, where that house washed into the river, I mean, there's nowhere to build, so you can't really rebuild there. It would be absurd if they had some sort of right to build out into the river where their house once was, now that there's no ground. And I think, that's an obvious thing along shorelines and along riverbanks that we have to be aware of. But I feel like this is a very reasonable, very balanced measure. And I'm very thankful for Auntie Karen for your life of work. All of you, Uncle Presley, Auntie Maka'ala, for your commitment to our environment and this hard work. And obviously I'm in very strong support, and I thank everyone for their time.
Councilor Mercado?
I'd like to follow up on that. Something I definitely feel is there is a responsibility and risk in owning a home on the beach, or even buying a 75-year-old wooden house. It wasn't 75 then, but a 50-year-old wooden house. So at some level, people, have to be aware that there is going to be a challenge. I appreciate the patience of the council and the room to allow me to ask and explore the very real concerns that were coming pretty much all from people who reside in those houses and really have a hard time affording, or some of them, most of them having a hard time being able to afford it. And if somebody needs to look ahead and think, is this responsible for me? Maybe they need a different home. It might be that case. I want to also acknowledge that this might taper in these excessive rebuilds that have priced out much of the long-standing community in those areas. I want to appreciate all that has been said in terms of having the state really push on those shoreline surveys, because the vegetation, when it's planted into the beach, it not only takes the beach, but it sometimes, oftentimes, even removes the view. You can't even any longer see Makana from the Makua Beach access. So those are very big issues. I want to also acknowledge that this really isn't just a North Shore piece. And when I go to Kaua to work out there, usually I stay at a friend's house for 2-3 nights, and I focus a lot of my Kaua attention when I'm in that area. And since I've been in office, the place where I stay, they've probably lost a ½ acre of their yard. They recognize that that's part of their kuleana in living right there, but it has substantially changed. And so Kaua has that, and what I see down there is sandbag conflicts between neighbors. So somebody will sandbag up to protect their piece of beach, but then it eats away the neighbors. So this is really important, and I support the intent, and this has been a big issue for me for many years. And I recommend, if any of the real estate companies are watching, it really needs to be on the disclosure statement that there are these limitations. People need to know that when they make the purchases. That my heart is not mean-spirited towards the people who have houses along the beach, but we need to be responsible, need to be aware, and I would just want to repeat what Uncle Presley said, is that people never used to build right there. People didn't build right on the beach, especially with big, heavy concrete foundations, and we saw just exactly what does happen in our 2018 flood, and it just washes the houses away. So I'm appreciative and supportive of the plan.
Just wanted to say I appreciate the discussion for our planning department, of course, and all the information, and of course Karen and all the diligence there, along with Makala and Presley. Overall, whether it be sea level rise, coastal erosion, construction, all of it, access is all discussing, but the biggest part to me overall is the cultural part, that we got to make sure that cultural connection is there, and being on, having our mo'opuna now, and I know you know, get the mo'opuna, all of us, having access and just making sure that we have that. Nobody can tell us no. And that cultural side has to resonate, and I like what Presley was saying and Makala about that too. So it's just a whole collaboration of everything together, and which will resonate not only here, I think, throughout our whole access in general, which is very, very important. So I'm not going to go on and on because we've had numerous discussions, but I truly believe in continuing, but making sure the cultural part is connected every step of the way. And then it will come out to something that will resonate for all of us and for our community. So I appreciate the discussion, and Mama for bringing it on the table. About.
Chair Bozo?
Thank you. Again, as a non-committee member, you know, when I went out on my first site visit and we walked the beach, I think Kipukai might have been with me. I was with another council member, and I was horrified to see the irrigation tubes in the Naupaka on the beach that belongs to the people. So I started to pull them out, and I took some pictures, and I sent it to DLNR, and I sent it to OCCL, which is the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands, and they did nothing. Anini Beach, where I talked a little bit about earlier, this guy was encroaching on our beach, having commercial activity. And our planning department went out and cited him, notice of violation, but the state did nothing. So the state's got to do better, and we got to do better. This is long overdue. You know, abuse of our lands out there is rampant. It's so obvious. It's hard for me to understand how these people get away with it. And hopefully this bill will help. And Makala, you said it's a lack of knowledge, lack of understanding on some of these people. It's a lack of respect. You know, you don't need to be an engineer to know that in an environment with sea level rise, that when you build on the beach or close to the beach, you're going to get wet. I like that. But, you know, Uncle Presley said it best, right? The Hawaiian people never built over there. Because were they all master degree doctors or PhDs? No, they had common sense and they had respect. So they didn't build their homes up on the coastline because they knew that the risks were involved. I did have a concern about the properties that are on cliffs, and I'm comfortable and satisfied with 8-27.32, where if they can prove to the planning director or the department that there are no hazards, coastal hazards or any hazards that they can rebuild. I'm satisfied with that. But I definitely was considering an amendment that would identify those. There's not that many homes that are built on a rocky cliff. They're basically on rock, not on a clay or dirt cliff like some of the mainland places where eventually it undermines and it caves in. These cliffs are rocks. It's going to be very difficult absent an earthquake or something like that. The $125,000, or is it $150,000? 120. I fully support that because I know Councilmember Cowden said she spent $185,000 25 years ago on repairs. The median price back then for Kilauea was $235,000. That's of a home. So that equates to like a 79% value towards the of a new house. So just think about that numbers. If $1 million home did $790,000 worth of repairs and they're in a shoreline setback, they better get a shoreline certification. So I think, I don't know maybe you put gold toilets. I'm not sure what you put in your house, but that's a lot of money back then. My point is, if you're going to do that kind of substantial improvements on your property within the shoreline setback, that you should be required to do a shoreline survey. We have lost so much already. That's the only thing in my mind. That's the regret I have is why didn't we do this earlier? Because we have lost so much, and this will help at least going forward. So obviously, I fully support the bill. Again, I don't vote today, but I will vote next week, and I'm anticipating this will pass out today. There are no amendments, so again, there's no reason to having to defer. Planning won't be here next week, but if we got to defer it next week, if there's additional discussion that needs to be had, we can do that. But I'm perfectly okay with getting them out today. So thank you guys, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you, council members. I'll be voting in full support of this bill. I want to thank the introducers for introducing the bill and the community for working on this bill for years to come. I'm just going to ditto everything, and I'll just add this one piece. Whenever we're creating law here on the council, as the testifier shared, oftentimes we forget that the most important, or one of the most important kupunas to consider is Aina, is our relationship to our kupunas in this space. And oftentimes we create law for human beings, but as the space is different, as our culture and understanding is different, we are in relationship with water, sea, and land, and the considerations of what we create must also be in relationship to them. And I see this bill as bettering our relationship with Aina, trying to right some wrongs that we've already have done, and hopefully we can continue to keep doing better. And that's I think the purpose of this understanding of this bill. And so I'm in full support. I'm looking forward to see if there's any future discussion in next week if it passes out today. And so I'm really, again, I just want to send my mahalo to everyone who is working on this. With that said, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Carvalho?
Aye.
Councilmember Cowden?
Aye.
Councilmember Kuali'i?
Aye.
Committee Chair Bolasan?
Aye.
Motion passes.
With that, that's the only item for planning committee. That concludes the planning committee meeting.
Yeah, before I start our final committee with the Finance and Economic Development Committee, we're going to go into recess and have a caption break. Finance and Economic Development Committee to order. All members are present except our committee chair, Councilmember Kaneshiro. We have 2 items on our agenda. The first item is the minutes of March 4th. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
In a second, thank you. Wishing to testify? No? Anyone with discussion? No. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Clerk, can you read our next and final item?
Bill number 2981, a bill for an ordinance amending Chapter 5A, Kauai County Code 1987 as amended, relating to real property tax, which provides the Director of Finance with inspection and examination of real property powers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Could I have our real property and finance folks up? And can you just give us a really quick overview? I know this is basically a bill to give powers to our director, and then there's just three items, three sections, if you will. Just a quick overview, and then any questions for members.
Good morning, Chelsea Sakai, Finance. So the bill is, the 3 sections that you're referring to just gives our office express permission to do these things, express authority. Right now it's implied for both inspection of property as well as for promulgating rules. So the intent of cleaning up this language is to just make it clear that there's express authority to do these things as opposed to just implied.
So in saying express versus and implied, you're saying pretty much this is how you operate now.
Correct.
But you want language in the law to back that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Members, any questions for our folks here?
I do.
Councilmember Cowden?
Okay, so I guess you said this is currently how you do it. So I just got to have a little bit more detail. So can you tell us how property is inspected? And they're being inspected for the valuation of the property, is that correct?
Correct.
So how do you currently do it? We have like 30,000 properties. So somebody drive through in a car, we look at the sky. How do we do it? And how's that process done?
I'm going to defer to real property to give the specifics.
For the record, Randon Valenciano, a real property assessment. I am one of the staff members who is in the field doing inspections of properties. As Councilmember Cowden mentioned, we do have 35,000, give or take, parcels, and we are instructed to annually come up with market value assessments for each property. So the way we do this, because obviously that's a lot of work for our staff, we take multiple approaches to this process, one of which is we do get data on permits that are pulled by the public. And that is probably the most efficient process on checking new construction. It's a vetted process, meaning that the taxpayer applies for permits, we're informed the permits were filed, and we are going out to inspect them for completion. How does that come into their assessments? Is it helps determine if, for example, there was a new construction, if there were renovations, or on the other side of things, if there's demolition. And all that kind of affects the value of a building, which ultimately impacts your value of your property.
So do you do any kind of, I would think that like you'd maybe every few, it used to be, as far as I know, every few years a neighborhood is like driven through or like from the car. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do physical inspections.
But from a car, you don't go on the property.
So depending on the permit, some permits are for completion, and by that I would say, are we looking, if the lot in our property records were a vacant property and they pulled a permit saying they were going to build a house, that doesn't necessarily necessitate an in-depth inspection. It can require a drive-by, seeing that the structure was actually built as of the date of the inspection, and that allows our office to update our property records. If it's a different type of a permit, for example, an addition to the back of the property, for example, like an ADU that's not viewable from the road, that's when we would do an on-site inspection.
And so currently, do you call somebody and say, hey, we're going to be there on March 24th in the afternoon, will you be home? Do you give any kind of notice?
So in situations such as if we need to do an interior inspection because it's, for example, they converted a carport into living space, or they converted a living room into a bedroom, and that requires interior access, that's when we would be in contact with the taxpayer.
And then what about the bigger ag parcels, especially the CPRs along private easements? How are they inspected?
So when it comes to ag properties, that is an exemption that my office offers. And one of the requirements to be granted an agriculture dedication is that we require an inspection to confirm that actual use for ag purposes was being done on the parcel. That requires communication with the owner, and that's when we would coordinate going out to the property.
And then, so when I read this, I'm just trying to make sure I'm reading it right. I'm looking at item H on page 2. It says inspection and examination of real property. Upon presentation of property credentials to inspect and examine any real property in the county at reasonable times for the purpose of enabling the director to obtain all information that could in any manner aid the director in discharging the director's duty under this chapter. If such entry is refused, the director or his or her assistant shall have recourse to every remedy provided by the law to secure entry. So that says like maybe you might knock on the door when you come and you say, hey, I'm with the county. Is that what that's saying?
That is correct, and I can kind of describe our standards of procedure when we do a site inspection. We will be driving to the property in a county-marked vehicle. Typically, my inspectors all wear shirts that indicate who we are, what department we are, real property assessment. We will have badges with us. Typically, when we arrive on the property, we knock on the door. If the owner is there, we identify ourselves. We have business cards on us if they want to contact us later. We tell them what our intention is for this visit, what type of permit we're looking at. And if they're not there, we hang door hangers on their front door. Basically tells them that our office came by, no one was home. This is the number to call us if you had any questions.
So if you go and you see something that seems inconsistent with what you're expecting, like maybe you presume there's a rental, how is that managed?
So our office's job is to assess properties based on its actual use. Not all property that we go out to matches the property record. So for example, if I'm supposed to see a vacant property or a property with one house, and I go out and I see 2 houses, then that would cause me to update my record. And I would either measure out that building, take pictures, so that way their property record is accurate to what's there physically.
So let's presume they weren't home, and you went and you discovered another building, and that maybe somebody presumably was living in it, or there was something. Do you call them afterwards, or how do you contact the property owner and say, hey, something didn't seem consistent?
So every owner is notified of their assessment notice that it's annually sent out December 1st. That will include any property records that were updated from the previous year, including changes in tax classification, changing in if we added additional, for example, buildings for it.
So if you added additional buildings or use, when they get the inspection notice the next December, maybe you came out in February, but the next December it would be something that would change their tax class.
For use, yes.
And they wouldn't know till they got that piece of paper in December.
That is correct.
Do you think there's a better way we can handle that? Maybe that's not a question for you.
Well, they would have known that we were there because they would have left the door hanger saying that they were there inspecting the property.
But it doesn't say what was happened, right? It doesn't say, oh, we've doubled your tax rate now because we found. It doesn't say what was found or what seemed aberrant.
Correct, but they could call the office to ask what had happened in that visit.
And if they didn't call the office, they wouldn't know till the next December.
Until they got their notice.
Okay, and then, okay, let's see. Okay, so is there a window of time to avoid a taxation penalty, interest, or application of a new structure? Like, say, for example, you thought something, but it wasn't correct, and they didn't know. How are they supposed to, when's their window of time?
It would be similar to the rest of the public when they get their assessment notices, that there is the appeal window, that December, the month of December, to appeal their notice.
So I looked at that, and I realized I should have looked at this more deeply in the past, because some things that aren't being changed right here, that was really surprising to me, like when I look at O, or N, depending. This is on page 3. And I will have a couple questions on this retroactivity, but it says, regarding remission of delinquency penalties and interest, except in cases of fraud or willful violation of the provision of this chapter, let's assume that's not the case, the director may remit any amount of penalties or interest added under this chapter to any tax that is delinquent for not more than 90 days as a case of excusable failure to pay within the time required by the chapter. But right above that, it says in here, if you actually filed an appeal, you only get those 30 days. You can only get a settlement or a compromise if you didn't file an appeal. Is that correct? That's what it says in L or K. Okay, here it is, like right here above in L. For purpose of this subsection, compromise pertains to disputes where no formal appeal has been filed and taxes are partially or fully waived. The director may waive any amount of interest and penalties pursuant to 5A-1.2 without council approval. So that's what I just had read, which is this piece about the 90 days. So I apparently have been informing the public wrong. I've been telling them you can only get help if you file an appeal at the beginning of December and you have that 30 days. But this says if you don't do it, then you can actually have a compromise or a settlement. And so it's just like, that's never been brought forward to us. So I was really surprised when I saw that. So people can get a very large protection there. So that was surprising to me. So is that correct? If you don't file an appeal, you have 90 days to get a compromise that can drop all that interest and penalty.
Scott Teruya, real property. A compromise is very, very rare. In my 29 years, I've only had one compromise, and it was for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. And I believe Kauai County also had that compromise where you waived penalty and interest provided that they paid the principal. And that would be a compromise. It would have to come before the council for that. Other than that, I don't think the director would ever waive. You can check all the years. I don't think anybody would compromise. That compromise is pretty substantial to me.
Okay, well, in a meeting that we can have separately, I can give you a number of examples that are recent and substantial.
Of a compromise?
Well, a settlement maybe? Maybe it's the word settlement?
Settlement is different from a compromise.
Okay, so I don't want to get real specific on different people right here, but there was significant, like more than $1 million, pretty big settlements that I'm aware of, but we can talk about that later because I was seeing that. So I just have another one relative.
Can I
yeah.
Can I try and get you to ask questions about the proposed changes?
Yes.
And whether there's anything about those proposed changes you cannot support and potentially would like to change with an amendment. So rather than picking other sections, unless it ties into that section.
It ties in.
I want to see the tie.
Okay. So I'm looking at this retroactivity of rules. Can you maybe read to me and explain what was LM and then MN, because I don't really understand it well enough to be able to ask the right question.
I may need the help of the county attorney on that one.
Well, I mean, we just read it. Maybe it becomes evident to other people.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Like on page 3 towards the top, it's got bracketed L and then parent M, and it says retroactivity of rulings. So then it has underlined prescribing extent to which retroactivity will not apply. I guess I'll read it to you. To prescribe to the extent, if any, to which any ruling, regulation, or construction of the provision of this chapter shall be applied without retroactive effect. And then the next piece is about the retroactive effect. The next piece, which is bracketed M, then parent N, retroactivity of rules, if expressed or obviously intended to promulgate rules with retroactive effect if retroactivity is expressed in the rule or obviously intended by the rule. That's really vague to me. I don't know what it's saying. It says we can promulgate rules and retroactively apply them.
Correct. If it's stated in
what?
In a decision or in a ruling.
The language does kind of sound, lawyer-like, if you will. But basically, these two sections are saying, the first one is the director gets to decide if he's going to apply retroactivity or not. And then the second part is, if he's applying retroactivity, he gets to say by what process.
Correct.
But obviously, whatever that is, it's established in your administrative rules or what have you.
Correct.
And you would use the same for everyone, right?
Correct.
Well, thank you. And when I look at the purpose, so I'm going to read the purpose of this bill. It says the purposes of this ordinance are to provide the County of Kauai Director of Finance with inspection and examination of real property powers under 5A, Chapter 5A, and to expressly provide the director with the authority to promulgate rules and with retroactive effect. So I looked it up. I did a whole bunch of that, and what I could tell, and I even used AI because I was like, what does this mean, And that says you can decide, hey, this is good rules, and I'm going to apply it backwards. That's what it sounds like it applies. Is that correct?
I believe so.
So in AI, it certainly says that is a ex post facto violation. I mean, AI, I send it all in, that it's not fair or right to do that, because how when we talk about retroactively apply, is that a month? Is it 3 months? Is it a year? Is it 3 years? Can you give me an example of when one would do that? I'm trying to think of when we could do that where it's fair. If we could create a new rule and say, but this is back 5 years. I mean, I just need to know what that example would be.
I don't know that I have enough experience with specific cases to be able to do that.
And do either of your people who actually work that, do you have examples?
Okay. Everybody would apply.
Good morning, Council. Tyler Saito, County Attorney. Councilmember Cowden, I believe we've discussed some of your questions before, and the reasonableness of retroactive rule. Courts have said it's no more than, I believe, a year or two. So it would be a case-by-case review.
So would that be, I'm just trying to really understand. I'll be honest, this is the reason I ran for mayor, right? I pulled my papers and filed over this bill. So it's that strong to me. I'm really uncomfortable with it. So I want to make sure I'm understanding what it says. does this say if you go on a property and you look and let's say they've got dwelling units, which you could probably find on a whole lot of properties, and you look at it and you go, well, this has been here for a while, which would be a reasonable thing to say, and that you can't have this. We bet this is here at least 5 years, 7 years. We've looked for pictures. We went on pictography, and we see it that the structures have been here. We went and we inspected. Looks like somebody's living there. Would you be able to say, we're going to change your tax category and retroactively apply that for 7 years based on pictography? I'm just coming up with something here, and that you're going to have penalties and interest for all those 7 years. Could that happen? That's what, when I read this, that's what I would say that it could happen.
Case law indicates that it would be unlikely that you could go back 7 years. The retroactivity period needs to be reasonable, and 7 years is probably unreasonable.
Okay, so let's say it's 3 years, but that's an example of when you would be retroactively applying something. You go and you see they have an auto mechanic shop on their ag property that was never permitted. And you go, all right, we're going to change your tax class. We're going to retroactively apply this. We can tell from whatever reason this has been there, so maybe the max is 3 years. Would it be that they would get this information the next time they got that little card in the mail? Or would they get some fine? I mean, they don't get a fine, they would get penalties and interest. I'm just trying to be able to understand what this really means, because when I hear that we're doing this now because it was implied but not necessarily codified, now we're codifying it, but it wasn't codified before. So I'm trying to understand the expression of this.
It's hard to get into specifics because these are all going to be case-by-case incidences. So to generally state, the intent of this rule is to give express authority to the director to react in situations when a case may require the county to promulgate rules with retroactive effect. So there's a variety of circumstances when that may apply. I can't opine on when and why we would do something as a hypothetical. I don't know.
Okay. And promulgating rules, it can be any kind of new rules, or do those rules have to have a basis in ordinance?
Under Chapter 91 of the Hawaii Revised Statutes, that sets forth how administrative rules are created by agencies. The agencies must act within their statutory authority, so it can't go in excess of the ordinance. So the rules would have to be within the bounds of whatever the law.
Yeah, they couldn't go in and say, well, you can't really have llamas on your property when we don't have a rule about that.
It would have to be consistent with whatever the council has established for the real property tax code.
And so most of the promulgation would probably happen right after we establish things with the new ordinance?
It's hard to say. I don't know.
Okay. I don't think I have more questions for them. I have, discussion.
Okay. Other council members with questions for either the county attorney, finance, or real property?
Real quick, and I'm not sure who can answer this one, but we have that ability now. If you find a property that was misclassified, let's say the auto shop on ag, obviously that'll be a zoning violation as well, but for real property tax purposes, we have the mechanisms in place right now where you could back or charge the proper tax rate for previous years. Does that even exist?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. Let me try to answer it two different ways. One of them, first of all, if it's vacant and we find a house there, that's considered omitted property. So the county has the ordinance behind them to go current +2.
Okay, that's exactly what I was, because I thought we did have that already in place.
Yeah, every county is a little different. In Maui County, I know you can go as far back as you could find it. If you have enough evidence, and you have pictometry nowadays, you can go as far back, but the Kauai County Code only allows current +2.
Thank you.
No questions, council members? Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to testify? Come on up, Mr. Psychos.
And for the record, Lonnie Psychos. As this bill's written, I'm opposed to this. I don't think you should pass this. I was a resident of Maui County for 25 years. Today, you watch in the news media the attempt to change the use and the zoning for transient accommodation, vacation rentals. So when I lived on Maui, we had endless county council meetings. We had endless public discussion, and the decision was made that all of these units that today are vacation rentals were perfectly legal and approved by the county, and the county enticed the people to buy these units as investments. Today, we have a new crop of county politicians who were not there when this discussion went on, and now they want to change the zoning on all of these apartments. And so I don't have an opinion about whether or not that should be done, but I do have an opinion about the fact that all of the owners of those apartments were enticed by the county to come invest the money in the county, and the county fully intended to take advantage of the differential between property taxes for the vacation rentals and the properties that people lived in. And so from my perspective, living on Maui at the time, the county lost its mind and went overboard creating vacation rental units. But it doesn't change the fact that everybody that bought one was enticed by the county. And I have no doubt that before this is over in Maui County, a tremendous number of those units are going to stay in vacation rental, or the county is going to have to pay the differential of the profit that they lost by not being able to continue to rent their units out. And so my problem with the retroactivity of rules is nobody in the county can define what that means. The county attorney says he thinks it might be 2 years. Right? You can pass this, you don't even know what the time limit of retroactivity is, or whether or not you're going to be violating people's federal civil rights. So I think y'all are way ahead of yourselves, that you need to get these legal things figured out before you bring this bill and pass it. Secondly, the amount of power that you're giving to an appointed official is stunning. You want to give this much power, you should create an elected position, right? This is absurd that an appointed person, you people will not have an auditor who's the only person in the county government that the public would trust to audit what they do. They're allowed to give tax breaks to whoever they decide to give tax breaks to. It's right in here. There's no criteria, just when they decide to do it. I'm totally against this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? Do you have anything else, Lonnie? You want to come back for a second time? Okay, thank you. Calling the meeting back to order, members. Final discussion. Councilmember Cowden.
Yeah. So I guess Lonnie made a heavier point of what I was trying to say is this is so vague and there aren't guardrails. You know, there doesn't really put any place in here, this item bracket K, parent L. The director may settle any real property tax appeal regardless of the disputed amount, whether filed with the Board of Review or any court of law.
What are you reading?
Pardon me, it's on the bottom
It
of the page.
doesn't sound like one of our 3 sections.
But it applies to it.
Okay, so
It
it's a
applies-
rule that is, it's language that is in place, that will remain in place,
And-
because there's
and
nothing
adding-
before us.
And adding to these changes, it gives a tremendous amount of power with no guardrail. And
Okay.
it is, you know, I actually bounced this off a handful of lawyers in the private sector that, you know, would be impacted by this. And, you know, they definitely say legal suits are almost certain to happen. Another one said life of the land could take this down quickly. I think we need to be much more careful with whatever is there. And just because we're being told this is legal, it doesn't make it right. You know, I've been receiving complaints that this type of action is, you know, they are going through it. So I appreciated that our inspector basically validated that as what's happening. So people get this policy like almost a year later, and they don't have a way to say, hey, you didn't really interpret this correctly. And if they miss that window, so this variation in, you know, tax policy is so profound that the outcome of an unexpected taxation shift can, you know, as I was saying in the last one, cause the calling of a loan. If something goes from owner-occupant and then it becomes resident, they lose their cap. I think that's probably a little less likely to happen than for things to go to commercial residential. Commercial residential, they don't lose their cap. But if they lose their cap and they don't know about it, you know, and they miss it, and their property taxes have the capacity. I was doing the math on it. It could go up 9 times. You know, if the property increases in value and it goes from $2.59 to $6.35, I'm doing that by memory. How much people lose their property, and when they're not even getting the communication, because a lot of this communication goes to the lender. And so when the lender gets it, and they say, hey, you can't qualify for an extra $1,500 or $2,000 a month, these are real stories. And I really want to do everything I can to avoid unintended consequences. I don't for a minute think that the finance department's trying to, you know, unhome people, but it is outcomes that happen. And so I am completely uncomfortable with this, and it's so vague. And when I look at something like MN, retroactivity of rules if expressed or obviously intended, it's so unclear to me. And it might be that it comes from a case study out of another court case, but we're going to have a different council here next year, with the exception of probably 3. We'll have a different administration. All these changes happen, and there's not even any memory, and people look, they don't know. So I am deeply uncomfortable with the impact that can happen to our community, and we spend so much money trying to build people rental units, and I'd rather just keep them in their houses. And so if we miss kind of taxing somebody a little bit more, one other comment. I asked our planning director a few years back how many houses are likely out of compliance, and that would be with zoning or planning rules, but probably a lot, or maybe out of compliance with the tax rules. But he had said, I asked more or less than 50%. He said, definitely more than 50%. So a lot of this is complaint driven. So you have a conflict with somebody, somebody on the property gets divorced with somebody else. people can file these complaints, and they do happen. And people's life goes into a free fall when they cannot manage the tax that they're confronted with, particularly when there's penalties and compounded interest. So I am very uncomfortable with it because I think it could have devastating impacts on people, and I want to make sure that we're really careful and that we're not discretionary. And the piece that I started to read that you wanted me to stop reading, it's got may and shall. So the finance director may settle or compromise. And so it can be very discretionary, and there is a perception in our community that if you're on the right team, you can get away with anything, and if you're on the wrong team, you can get falsely accused. So this has room, and I'm not placing this on our existing people. I want to be clear on that. Randall, thank you for coming, too. Really great testimony. But we don't know who will be in the future, who will be the next leaders, or who will be. So I think we have opportunities right now to see when elected officials at a much larger level than the county have what feels like gone rogue. And we don't want that to happen here. We don't want to go out and displace all kinds of people. In my view, you could go up and down a whole lot of properties and look at all these unpermitted little living units that is probably a third of our affordable rentals, for the people who don't have money, and they would just all be gone. I mean, that could happen for planning, it can happen for taxation, but I really want to protect the people, and that to me is more important than potential revenue generation if we don't use extreme caution. So that's my perspective. So I definitely won't be supporting this. I have a couple amendments that I'd like to make, but it has to go on to a different bill because it's on different parts of this document. It's not on these particular ones, and I'm working on those.
Okay, other council members?
I just have a couple of questions for Councilmember Cowden. The first, you said people will lose their cap without knowing. How would someone lose their cap without knowing?
Because if they went and they inspected, and I'm just making an example.
Well, make it a real example, because how would someone know, or how would someone lose the cap without knowing? Because your last statement was portraying a very dark picture, and a picture that we don't care, a picture that we're out for money grab. And what I'm hearing is we're looking at a bill that's going to put people in the right tax class that they belong. That's what I'm hearing. But again, get back to the loss of cap without knowing. How would that even happen?
That would happen, like if you go, like these are real examples. I want to
give me an example. That's what I'm asking.
Real example, like a property that is like a farm, and it has recently been recategorized as a vacation rental in a.
Okay, that wouldn't get the cap. That would not have a cap. The only way you get a cap is owner occupant or long-term rental. So how would you lose your cap unless you moved out of the house or you kicked out your low-income rental?
If say that was what was decided was the case. When somebody goes and they're not actually talking, they get some little piece of paper on the door. Like if here's an example. Somebody is doing a medical trade on a house. Right? That happens. This was something that had been in front of us before. Kipukai was part of that. You can do a medical trade. These are real stories. You're going to Mayo Clinic because you have cancer, and you got to go, for a month or 2 or 3. So what the hospital places do is they recommend that you do this house trade. Right? They put them on there so people trade their house so they can go and stay someplace else free near Mayo Clinic or City of Hope.
Okay.
So they're there. Somebody else is in the house. Somebody comes by, and it's the tax people, finance, and it's pretty evident that these are tourists. that are there, and they got their body boards, and they're, not only it's tourist body board, but they come, and it's clearly somebody who is temporary rental. And all they have to do is talk to them for a minute. So then they think it's a vacation rental, right? It's a vacation rental. So then they go, all right, it's a vacation rental. So then the next time they get their little piece, it's not.
But that's a notification, right?
But the notification goes to this.
And then they have the right to appeal, right?
But hang on. No, my point is this, and I think we went through this so extensively when we were going over this, where if you're going away for a medical treatment, or if you're going away because of military duty, if you're going away, the clock doesn't tick. My point is this, and I don't want to get into these possibles, what if. I want to know.
This woman died. She stopped going. She was so depressed, I could give you her name. This is before you were on council again.
I'm not talking about a specific case. I'm saying, for me to lose my cap, I got to know.
You'd lose the cap.
I would have to know.
You would lose the cap because maybe they leave a little notice on the doorknob, but the person who comes on vacation, they see some little notice. It doesn't mean anything. They set it to the side. And the person comes back from their cancer or their treatment 2 months later. They don't know. When they're going to find out is when they get this piece. I don't want to give people difficult life stories. I could give you difficult life stories.
Well, again,
and these are real stories that I've walked through.
We made sure that we remedied that in the bill by providing the exemptions for people that go away for medical treatment. That's there.
It's not in here.
Well, this is not the long-term, this is not the...
No, but this is where they could make a mistake. No. They could come, make a mistake.
You know, Councilmember, you paint this picture again of all of these what-ifs.
But they're real
This
stories.
This is what they're asking. They're asking to basically codify what they're already doing. For me, if they go up and they show their credentials, they want to go inspect the property. If they go to a property that was vacant land and now has 2 rental units on there, should be paying the tax.
No question on that one.
So that's what this does. That's what this
I'm
does.
talking about
They're not peeking in windows. They're not spying on people's properties. This is saying, on the presentation of proper credentials to inspect and examine any real property in the county. That's what it's saying. As far as the rules.
That's not consistent with what I'm hearing from public.
That's exactly what I heard from him.
I heard from him, but he might not have been the one who did it. He hasn't been.
Again, that's your stories that you're hearing from the community. I have not had that, but if that is happening, like I did tell you, call the cops. If I don't care what county employee goes onto somebody's property without authorization, call the cops. Call the cops, because that's against the law.
They don't know till they get that thing in December.
Anyway, the retroactive rules, it says to promulgate rules with retroactive effect if retroactivity is expressed in the rule. So it's not creating this secret or obviously intended by the rule. The whole process of an administrative rule, the process is, again, you draft the rule, you send it over to the attorney's office, they're going to make sure it's legal, then it's got to go to a public hearing. It's got to go to a public hearing. He doesn't have the authority to create rules without going through a public hearing and going through legal review. I mean, I'm not sure where in this whole, the picture again you're trying to paint is this devious method of going out to go collect money. I mean, I want this tax department to go out and make sure people are paying the tax that they should be paying. I want that. Also, I want you guys to, on the opposite side of that spectrum, is if you got someone paying, and we got a bill coming up next week to do exactly this. If you're paying more tax than you should, we should be reversing that. And how you do that? You do that by an inspection. You do that because someone said, hey, I'm in the wrong class. You can send somebody out to go make sure. It's not just to go grab money. It's also to make sure that people that are overpaying gets to be taxed at the right class. So I don't appreciate the perspective that is being painted, that is like, this is so dark and gloomy. It's quite clear to me that in the settlements and compromises, we had extensive discussion right here in this council. When was that? Last year? We did extensive discussion about the difference between a compromise and a settlement. The fact that $5,000 was the number that this council set. Anything beyond $5,000 would have to get council approved. We had a lot of discussion with this council here. And you sounded surprised, like I didn't know this was in place. Well, we had the discussion here. We gave that authority to the finance department. They didn't make this up.
Well,
so
you said you were asking me questions, but
I
you
did,
went through so
and
many, and I didn't get to answer.
No,
about
you
three
answered.
of them.
You
I
answered
didn't
the
answer
question.
about three of
You
them.
answered the question, and you
brought
gave an
up new
example.
ones. I brought up new ones.
My point is this: for me to lose my 3% cap, I gotta intentionally or knowingly drop out of the eligibility requirements. In other words, if I apply for my long-term rental so I can keep my cap and I get my long-term rental credit and the guy moves out and I bring in somebody that's paying market, I should not get the cap.
No problem.
But I would know that because I made the decision. Same with owner-occupant. And I appreciate what you guys are doing with catching these guys that are trying to establish two different owner-occupant residences, maybe here in Alameda. We're catching them. They should not be getting any tax breaks if they don't deserve it, period. That's how the system works. So I'm done.
I think the other thing to say too is that, and if for some reason they saw something and made the wrong determination, then when you get your notification of that increase, if you will, to a higher category of taxes, then you have that time by December to appeal. And then the specifics of that case can be addressed in the appeal. So, I mean, for us to say, I don't think it's fair to say, because as an individual, we have a different idea of what extreme caution is to how we move forward, that to say that others are not using extreme caution. And I would imagine that, and even when he talked about the settlements, or was it compromising, that it was a very, very rare thing. So I think these situations will be very rare, and they can be addressed. And why wouldn't we give them the ability to do what they're already doing and what needs to be done, right?
If I could just respond slightly. I appreciate all the positives that this has the capacity to do. And I appreciate the inspectors going out and looking. And I'm in agreement when people are intentionally doing the wrong thing, that we need to care for that. I'm saying there's not enough guardrails in here to be able to make sure that things don't happen outside of that. And there are stories. And I'm not putting down our county, but I'm saying there are stories, and I hear them.
This is the opportunity to add the guardrails in an amendment. This is the opportunity.
But I have to do the guardrails in a different bill, because where I need to do the amendments, I mean, I have it underway, but my understanding is I can only do those amendments on the underlined lines. I can't do it on the other lines.
That is not true. You can amend anything in that bill.
Anything on this
Anything in this bill you can amend. The question is, if it is a significant change and it needs to go back to a public hearing. But you have every right to introduce an amendment right now on any part of this bill, because the bill is on the agenda, not. So anything that is a significant change would we'd have to take a look. The attorney would have to.
Well, they're already written. It's already written that
I mean, I'm just telling you what the process is. That is not. You're not limited to amend only the amended portions. You can introduce an amendment on any bill. Again,
I was told not, because it's not in the purpose statement.
Well, yeah, you cannot go something against what the purpose of the bill is.
So I have things on other lines here.
You can amend that.
Okay.
And then let me state the obvious
I have
too.
those things written.
If what you're saying is you support this, but you want to add to it to strengthen it, if you will, and if that can't be done in this bill, then we should vote on this bill and support it because you support it.
I don't.
And then come forward with your other bill.
I can't support it this way. And a couple years ago, when I supported the significant change and was told we could do another bill, and that had to do with the rentals, the residential rentals, well, we never got that opportunity to do it. So I would like to...
How do you not get an opportunity to do a bill? Was it,
Because-
you put it on the floor and nobody seconded?
Finance kept saying, wait, and it didn't come back, and it's a long
So it was your
story.
decision to wait then?
That is not really accurate, but so here's.
It didn't come to the
Can I
floor
do
for a
this?
second.
Can I do this? I want to put this up for a suggestion.
Go
I
ahead.
want to put this up for a suggestion, is to, and I'm not moving yet, but to defer this so that we can come back in 2 weeks at the next committee meeting with those amendments.
If you have the amendments drafted, and if it, this is what the purpose is. The purpose of this ordinance are to provide the county Kauai Director of Finance with inspection and examination of real property powers under Chapter 5A. If it's under that, you're in. And if you have the prepared amendments, why would we defer it? I would say,
Okay, well, it's written as another bill,
oh, it's another bill, okay.
because I was told that's what I had to do.
Okay, well, you
Because I
can do
wanted
this.
to try and make it concurrent, and I was instructed by council services staff that I couldn't put it in here.
Okay.
My only other thing is that you mentioned something about other attorneys, but you've worked with our attorney, correct?
I've worked with our attorneys. There are attorneys who live on the island that are negatively impacted by actions that have gone. You know, they have.
Point of order, guys. Just trying to, for my own sanity here. Can we discuss them as separate issues? Because I'm getting confused. Like, we have 3 things here underlined that we're not talking about, and we are talking about an entirely different bill now.
But it's all.
I understand that it's all related to this bill, but if it's not related to the actual issues that we're discussing today, can we vote on this and then vote on that, or can we?
Yeah.
I'm just a little.
And I'm asking to defer so we can
Okay.
write it together.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to get clear because I'm
Okay,
getting.
so
I feel like we're like
and
going into like
I
tax
will make
conversation
that-
about.
I will make that motion in a moment because I would then adapt it even more. So.
I think before you make the motion, we should hear from folks on where they're at.
Okay, yes,
Are
please.
you ready to vote on this today? You want a deferral? You want to give her time for a deferral to work on her separate bill or potential amendment? I'm ready to vote on this today.
I'm ready to vote today. If she's working on a separate bill, that's a separate bill. But I think these are. I wouldn't say they're housekeeping, but they're kind of like housekeeping, in my opinion. It's kind of, again, giving them the legal backing of what they're already doing. And I don't think what they're doing is unreasonable. I think that's kind of been their job all this time. So yeah, I'm prepared to vote. I'm also willing to entertain another bill should you decide to introduce it.
Go ahead.
For me, based on what I know,
Mike.
the information that I've gotten, I have every confidence in what they have planned right now. We've been talking about it. So I'm in support.
Okay, Councilmember.
Thank you. I was able to ask some of the questions that I had about this bill earlier. What became evident to me is that this is pretty standard in the sense that every other island has this authority to investigate. It seems like we give our building department the authority to investigate. Why wouldn't we give our finance department the authority to actually investigate and see if violations are happening? I prefer physical inspection rather than relying on drone and AI technology to determine whether somebody's in violation, and that's kind of a lot of the way counties are going. So to me, giving them the explicit authority to inspect and determine physically for themselves makes sense to me. Again, every other island allows that. If we want to discuss about things related to compromise, things about different types of house trades, different things about how we notify them, I'm totally open to that. And if you have measures on that, I'd love to have that conversation. I think we can always make these situations fairer and better. Out of these 3 things that are being modified in this measure right now, I'm in support of giving director access. I think that makes sense. It also is being abused. We have very wealthy landowners on Kauai that refuse access to our team. It's a huge spit in the face to our county to be ripping them off for potentially huge amounts of money because they're continuing to fraud our tax system. So I support giving them that authority. I also, I had concerns with some of the retroactive stuff, but when I see it in the context of the other measure and the fact that people are making decisions that are based on an individual situation, some of those things should be retroactive. Like if we are passing a bill today on something, there may be. I like the fact that it was limited to 1 to 2 years. I think that that can be reasonable, especially in the cases where we want to adjust. For example, I'm working on a tax measure to help communities, like particularly Native Hawaiian communities, and I would love that to be retroactively applied to families that have been improperly taxed for the last up to 1 to 2 years. So when I asked my questions about that, I felt confident about the legal response to that. I'm definitely have no issues with this measure with those 3 modifications, and I'm happy to vote on it. I still would love to see ways that we can make, compromises, ways that we can help protect families that are improperly rated at the wrong tax rate. I think that's important. But when it comes to these few small changes that are underlined here, I'm in support and I'm ready to vote on it.
Can move to defer.
There's a motion to defer. Is there a second?
I did have one more comment. And the motion to defer would stop all discussion.
Oh, okay.
But before,
I just wanted to clarify that, on the agenda on Sunshine Law, on the agenda is a bill amending, relating Chapter 5A of the real property tax. So that's what we can discuss. Any of us can discuss any part of the bill that is being introduced. So I don't want the public to think that we're not able to discuss, and that if you have amendments that you're not going to be allowed to put them in. I think I'm curious, even absent hearing about the amendment, I mean, what area of this bill, what guardrail are you considering?
Well, several.
Yeah, I mean, like, give me one.
Okay.
I want to hear one.
So one would be that when these settlements and compromises are done, that the council would get, quarterly reports on it, so that, like, if it really doesn't happen very often, then we'd be able to say, okay, it doesn't happen very often, and if we are hearing about them, we could say, well, what about this case, and this case? And they might say, well, that was actually settled in a court, or it was a semi-judicial discussion, so it's not exactly a settlement or a compromise. Maybe these things that I'm following and I see where it's $1.5 million in one hit that they never come and tell us, that
$5,000, anything over $5,000, they got to come to the council.
I'm talking like 1.5 million,
Yes,
or over 100. But so it's not being shared with us. So I want to learn where that is.
Anything over $5,000, they got to get council approval.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
But only if it goes through the Board of Appeals.
No.
I mean, the review.
No, the compromise and settlements, anything over $5,000 has to get council approval.
It says, let me finish reading, and I was stopped from reading it.
Yeah, read it.
you weren't stopped from reading. You were asked to tell us what you were reading. That's all. Go ahead.
I have to, okay. For purpose of this section, compromise pertains to dispute where no formal appeal has been filed and taxes are partially or fully waived. The director may waive any amount of interest or penalties pursuant without council approval. So
keep going. Keep going.
You want me to read the next piece?
Yes, because that's exactly the point.
So that's what I was trying to have them explain to me. Prescribing extent to which retroactivity will not apply.
No. You're talking about you stop. That's what I'm talking about. When you say things that you take things out of context. No. She was reading, the director may set any real tax, regardless of disputed on whether filed with the Board of Review. If a property owner disputes the amount of taxes owed but is not filed an appeal, the director may compromise the dispute, provided the director shall obtain council approval for any compromise resulting in a tax refund exceeding $5,000.
For a single year tax year on
Correct.
an individual parcel.
Correct.
For the purpose of this subsection, compromise pertains to disputes where no formal appeal has been filed and taxes are partially or fully waived. The director may waive any amount of interest and penalties pursuant to section 5A-1.2 without council approval. So if I look at what that section is, it says, so it's kind of a little hard to find that right here, but I read it right
Councilmember,
here.
isn't the bottom line to this, whether it's the amounts that require council approval or not, you're saying that when it does not, and the property tax can do it on their own, that they're not reporting to us, or that we have no way of knowing about it?
Yes.
Have you asked them for a report of the settlements and compromises, and have they told you no, it's secret or something? Or?
Well, I only really read this hard.
No, but you said
so
earlier
when this was like,
you want a quarterly report to the council.
Yeah.
So whether it's for the council and we put it in a law or something, have you asked for it and have they told you no? No, right? They're pretty forthcoming of giving us information.
Mr. Chair, we also get the quarterly report from the county attorney office regarding all settlements.
but we don't get this one. So this.
There has been none. I think he just said, there has been none.
If I don't want to bring up names of people, but when there are these large ones, because people call me and I'm following it, and I say, how did it end up? Did you get a reprieve on that $3 million penalty? And they say, well, it got to 1.5 million, and this is recent. So that to me is a significant one, and that never came before us.
I don't believe there was a compromise or a settlement, though. I mean, I don't believe that.
There was
I could be
another one
wrong.
that went from 109 to 8,000 or something like that. I mean, I have to look again.
Well, again, if anything beyond 5,000 should have come here.
But-
So
but
what I'm thinking is that is not, it may have come out of the appeals board, not from this, not from here.
If it came out of the appeals board, it's called the Board of Review, and it's over 5,000, we get that. So I'm just saying, I have struggled to see where this is consistent with what my experience is, and I tend to be a lint filter for people who are in crisis positions. And I go and I follow up on it, and it helps me to understand how to make bills better. And so this one seems pretty difficult.
Okay, so the reporting of that, okay, I mean, we can send it over.
So I want that.
But that
You
doesn't
told me
change,
just give
that
me
doesn't
one.
impact the structure of the bill. I'm trying to figure out what guardrails of the structure that you are having a hard time with.
I want some clarity. I want to understand what some of these words mean, and I brought that up. Retroactivity of rules, if expressed or obviously implied, to promulgate rules with retroactive effect if retroactivity is expressed in the rule or obviously intended. If that was an English statement in high school, you know, you would absolutely fail on that, you know?
Well, we had the attorney up here.
But I read the case, and it didn't land, you know?
He said the reasonableness of retroactive rule, and he said no more than a year or two.
But again,
That's what we got from the attorney.
This is the enabling language for the department to promulgate rules. This is not a specific rule. Every rule might have a different time limit. I mean,
So what I
this
worry
is just
about-
the enabling authority.
And what I worry about is like when it's not us, right? When it's a different team and people decide they want to take over a whole area. I mean, really, I don't want to name places, but there's so many areas that are clearly out of compliance, And these aren't the rich. When we build rules to tackle the rich, the extreme wealth, who gets caught in the grinder is the people who can barely pay their bill.
Well, I would just say this, and I'll say this for the record. To me, my perception is completely different. It's the guy that wants to build a little close in his garage that got to go through the ringer to get a
That's
garage
what I'm
built.
saying is happening.
And then the rich guys get to do what they like.
That's right.
So,
And I don't want
again, this has nothing to do with, you're talking about building, permitting, and zoning and all of that. I think the real property tax here is what we're talking about.
Well, like, for example, I'll just give one more example. I know we're going for a while, and I'll just give this one last example. It was just before we went to Washington. On one day, I had 4 different individuals call me, begging me to be able just to stay in their house for a week or 2 or a month. I know how that goes because I've done it, and sometimes it's a year or 2. or park in my yard, and I can't say yes to them no matter how hard their situation is, because my fear is somebody's going to file some complaint on me and they're going to go, oh, she's got tenants. Well, I don't have tenants. I've never charged anybody for staying in my house. But that's just a small example. Like, if somebody wants to hurt you, the people who can't fight their way out of paper bag, because in our non-compliance, whether it's planning or real property tax, you do best if you can afford a lawyer. And if you can't afford a lawyer, it's very difficult to correct the problem. And so I get it that those with wealth and who can afford the right lawyers, they can solve their problem. I'm worried about the person who lets their brother's friends stay in their garage at no cost, and then they end up having a problem. I just want to make sure all the little nuts and bolts are clean in here. And so I want to work on it more, and I
don't see how this bill doesn't talk about how they assess, or I have yet to get, and I could be completely wrong, and Scott is here to tell me, from anyone that was inappropriately had their owner-occupant status revoked because they went to a hospital visit, or because they, again,
point of order, guys.
Point of order.
I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do this again. Point of order.
You don't need to.
Okay.
Okay. Final discussion is complete.
Yeah.
We may have a motion to defer. And we've heard from everyone. Everyone's ready to vote. You do work, okay? We didn't hear from Councilman Bolasan, so we'll give him a chance.
Thank you.
I just want to mahalo the introducers of this bill and mahalo the administration for putting this forth. And I appreciate all the conversations happening and, exploring it as much as possible, the bounds of what we're looking at. From my point of view, just looking at this, to me, it's definitely housekeeping, and I appreciate you guys making sure you get all this lined up so that we can accurately and do the things necessary to protect existing homes and necessarily protect the rest of the community so that we're not getting taken advantage of. So I will be voting in support.
All right. If everyone's ready, then we will call for the vote. Roll call.
Councilmember Bolasan?
Aye.
Councilmember Carvalho?
Aye.
Councilmember Cowden?
No.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Council Chair Raposo?
Aye.
Committee Vice Chair Cooley?
Aye.
Motion passes.
That was our last.
That is, yeah, meeting adjourned.